Greetings, nerds. This is Scene and Nerd. I'm your host, Sarah Belmont, and with me, as always, is our Mr. Producer, Will Polk. How are you doing tonight, Will?
Doing very well. How you doing this evening, sir?
I'm doing fine.
That's good. That's good. Glad to
It
hear it.
is. It is. I don't really know how to start tonight's show because we literally just have one news topic and then
Yeah,
two shows and a movie to talk about.
yeah. Well, I mean, basically, the writer's strike. At this point, it's just like everything is. Even where people said they were going to proceed, they are not proceeding. So it's just been like a laundry list of like, oh, Blade's in his own case. Blade is almost getting there in the Flash movie realm of this like problems of everything from directors to writers to you name it. But the other things of I know the Andor folks were Tony Gilroy's giving some grief, but long and short of it, with the writer's strike, a lot of things, as we talked about, and don't need to really go into much more, things are being put on hold, and it's only been a week and a half, 2 weeks. So
It's funny. Amidst all of these on hold delay items, I saw an announcement that The Bear season 2 will be dropping on June 22nd.
yeah, but but I guess
Which I'm just putting out there because for those who haven't watched The Bear season 1, I believe Will included, you should, especially if some of the shows that you have watched are being postponed or delayed. It's an easy binge. There is one particular episode that is pretty well done. Like, it's like, man, that directing, fascinating.
Yeah.
And I believe they're half-hour episodes. I binged it, I feel like, all in one day because they're half hours and I think they're only 8 episodes. So it's like, when I say an easy binge. But it's dark humor, but not too dark. Like, I mean, the main actor on the show used to play Lip on Shameless, and I watched Shameless for like a good multiple seasons. That's dark humor. This is like 2 steps down, but still up there. But anyway, I was excited about that because when I just hear about cancellations and delays or just projects being pushed on hold, then I'm like, okay, now is the time for people to start uncovering these shows that when all of your shows were on, I can't watch it right now, but now's the time to get on board. So we'll see what happens within that months.
That are you sure you haven't been like stalking my YouTube watching? Because like it's so funny. The Bear is one of those shows that I do have on my list because speaking of the writer strike and delays, I was watching one of my usual shows, Dan Le Batard's show, and he was, and so they had him, the one of the lead writers of the show, on there to talk about how it's impacting writers, and I guess he's a pretty young kid. I mean, African American kid. I can't remember his name right now, but he was talking about how the writer's strike, and they're in the process of, I think, working on The Bear season 3, and everything is just ground to a halt, and people like him who do shows for streamers is a good example of some of the things that the writers are dealing with, and that there's no equitable payment for people who do a lot of writing on streamers because there's a shorter episode count, so but yeah, it was really I was really like, okay, I got to check this show out because I really liked the things they talked about it, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna add this to my list.
Yeah, everybody take note. He added it to his list after he heard from the writer, not when I recommended it.
No, but I was it's more like, okay, your recommendation further justifies my intent to watch it.
No, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I watched it like a year ago.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. Oh, I know it's been around for a while. It's just one of the.
Yeah.
It's like you said. It's just a lot of content that's out there, and because now things may get delayed, a lot of hidden gems may be discovered
Yeah.
of stoppages.
Yeah. Um, and Superman and Lois is currently on the bubble for renewal. It's not. Will is being pessimistic when he wrote this note because he's saying it's not looking likely that'll happen. And with that in mind, this season would make a hell of a lot more sense to me if it doesn't get renewed because I feel like this is in a weird way Batwoman season 3.
Well, I don't know. I wouldn't go there. I have to disagree with you on this one.
I'm not saying in terms of quality. I'm just
Oh, okay.
saying in terms of like how safe they've played this season.
Okay.
They're clearly not looking to really start any, we're going to answer this question 2 seasons from now because we don't even know if we're going to get a next season. Like, I don't know. There's something about it where it's not as strong and like, let's start these mysteries. Let's have multiple storylines. They do have all of that, but what I'm saying is they're not planting a lot of seeds.
Okay.
They planted like 2 seeds, and those 2 seeds are growing, and then we got the children's storyline.
Yeah, but before we get too deep into the episode this week, I do want to go back to why I was being a little pessimistic in the notes because a couple things have happened this week. I guess upfronts are starting to happen with the various networks, and of course we have talked about in months past about the CW being bought by another company, and they are basically completely revamping their focus on that network. And so today, of course, earlier this week, Walker, the Jared Padalecki show that was renewed for a final season, final season, reduced episode count. And then there was some articles about whether or not the remaining DC shows, basically Superman, Lois, and Gotham Knights, were going to get renewed or not. And earlier in the week, it was on the bubble, but then Walker Independence, the Winchesters, and Kung Fu were all canceled today. And an article in both Variety and Hollywood Reporter is looking like one DC show may remain, but odds are that it would be Gotham Knights because it's actually cheaper to be produced than Superman and Lois, which of course we've talked about the production values and everything of it, before. And it is like sort of next level. It is more closely production value wise to something you'll see on a regular network or even HBO Max than say what you are used to on a CW. So that's why, just to give some context to why I think at this point I was hopeful that we would get this maybe 4th and final with the reduced episode count, but it may not even get that now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So just wanted to give a little context to why I was like, this is not looking good.
Yeah. No, I knew you probably had your reason for putting that out there like that. Yeah. So with this week's episode, what did you think?
I actually like this week's episode. It's to your point, it is telling a story that is very self-contained to this season. At least parts of it, at least with the Bruno Mannheim pieces of this episode and this season. But there were some things, and even with the reveal, to get into some of the, we've been talking about Lex Luthor showing up and some of the things that we learned in this episode about Lex. It could also be resolved in this season, or if they are lucky enough to get picked up for another season, the ramifications of what we learned in this episode could also be told in subsequent seasons. So you're right. I mean, the way this season has been written, it could go. Maybe the showrunners definitely took the approach of like, let's not have things loose ends hanging out there in the event we get canceled.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was the only reveal, right? That, yeah, because what has been driving me crazy with the show this season is it's another episode where majority of the time our main characters are figuring out things that the audience already knows.
Mm-hmm.
Great. That's so entertaining. It's like,
Well,
I need to like actually talk to a TV writer and
yeah.
understand what drives them to have these reveals, like
Mm-hmm.
these shocking twists, and then like but you only reveal it to the audience, so you have to wait another few episodes for your characters to actually catch up. And it just drives me crazy. And also people, what was Mannheim's endgame? I don't understand this. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I understand he told John Henry Irons, if you ever show your face here, I'm gonna kill you.
Mm-hmm.
But his daughter was right there. His son was right there, and he's just like, get him out of the room. We're gonna kill him, and they'll never figure it out. I don't. What was the plan here? I don't get it. And also, been worried about Pia the entire dinner, which that must have been like a 5-course meal with the amount
Yeah.
of time they were in that restaurant.
Yeah.
For the entire dinner, and yet it takes him like it takes him so long to realize by her continuing to use her powers, she is like it's killing her, and
Mm-hmm.
he just I don't understand him. Like this episode, I understood him up until this episode, and then this episode, I'm like, you're supposed to be this guy with a big long end game. I don't see it with some of these moves you're making.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think part of the lack of the end game, I think, is because it is that it's the Capulets and the Romeo and Juliet thing going with the parents here, except they don't know one another. And so they're taking that classic story and putting it with the Mannheims and John and the Irons family. Because if Bruno had known that
Was
John
it?
Henry's daughter, yeah, he didn't know. No one knew. That's the thing. That's the thing that like why whenever John Henry like figured that went to whenever he was talking to the I guess Earth, whatever Earth they're on now, number John Henry's sister, the doctor, whenever she mentioned the name of the restaurant, that's when he put the things together as far
No,
as
no,
like,
no.
oh, yeah,
I know that. I
yeah,
I watched the episode too, but like that. Thank you for bringing this up, actually, because another issue I had with Mannheim this episode is how the hell did he not know about Nat?
that's
I
what.
could have sworn when
Mm,
he last saw John Henry Irons, he talked to him as if, oh, I know you. You're someone else. But and I did all this research and I'm planning to kill all your family. Granted, I guess, yeah, he could be talking about just about the
so
family he's aware of
yeah,
this earth. But still, like, it's been a few weeks. Are you telling me that he never like did some digging in on this new guy to make sure there were no other threads? Like between him and Lois, I don't know who's lacking in the investigation skills right now.
yeah, yeah. Well, I hear your point on that, but I think I took whenever they had that encounter earlier in the season, I think he meant John the John Henry A for lack of a better use that he killed earlier. I think he was telling John Henry B from the other alternate Earth that he was going to kill the rest of that family. I don't think he was aware of Nat because I know they I think seasons before. I mean Nat was pretty um pretty underground, as far as
Right.
being out there and stuff. So, as
But
far as as far as like, and any like social media or any kind of like trace or whatever things that a person would normally have that you could find in records. It just doesn't exist. So I think that's why he didn't have her. That's why he didn't know about that.
Maybe. Well, he also does mention like he doesn't go to Smallville, but it's on his list recently.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Okay, so let's go back because I don't know if you fully addressed what I was getting at, but
Okay.
so you brought up John Henry Irons not knowing and like this like Romeo and Juliet thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pretty sure it was the Capulets and the Montagues, if I'm
Yeah,
not mistaken.
that's correct. Yeah.
So how does that help justify the writers having Mannheim just see John Henry Irons and be like, okay, get the kids out of the room. I'm going to kill Nat's dad, like not in front of her,
Mm-hmm.
but she clearly will know it's me. Like,
Yeah,
and I
that
just
is a
see
pothole.
a kid who's a loose end that I then have to kill, but that's my son's girl. Yeah, I just
Yeah.
don't understand what he was thinking.
Yeah, well, that's just basically, yeah. Nat has, yeah, that it was a whole one. And the other hole with the whole sequence was once he did take him out of the room, why did he hesitate to like shoot him? I mean, it was like clear plot armor as far as like the steel suit coming from across.
Yeah,
from,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
Or
so
I
there were a
just
couple problems with that whole sequence as far as
right.
what happened then and there.
Yeah, yeah. It's just yeah. It was, and then well, when we all think Pia's dead, I was like, okay, good, because he's going to blame not only John Henry, but also Superman for Pia's death, even though he kind of did it. Like, you have that blind rage. So I get it. But she's not dead. I like how I need to take her to the hospital. And then before we know it, next scene, they're clearly at the DOD.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was just like, huh, so Superman's a liar. Cool. Okay.
Yeah.
That's not going to go over well.
Nope.
So so I was like, oh, you're so there. And then it was weird. Call me crazy, Will, or call me just like being a bit too aggressively nitpicky, but it was odd to me how majority of this episode, Clark is like, I don't care if Pia has cancer.
Mm-hmm.
We're taking her and Mannheim down. And
Mm-hmm.
at this point, he didn't know she had powers. He didn't know like she's clearly badass. No, he just knew she's a wife,
Yep.
mother with cancer. Let's
Mm-hmm.
take her down. By the end of the episode, I'm having second thoughts about she's
Yeah.
dying. She's almost dead. She's just not dead yet, so we can let her go. And John
Yeah.
Henry's like, what? So
Yeah.
like they're doing this weird thing with Lois and Clark, like
Mm-hmm.
both of them. Every episode, they like have a clear opinion,
Mm-hmm.
and then they switch sides by the end of it, and I'm just like, why are we doing this?
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean yeah, that's a very good point that you bring up there as far as Clark, because he was like, no matter what the yes, it's very brutal. It's a very like not cool thing to do, but I mean Bruno's a bad dude, and like you said, even though he didn't know at that point that she was Automatopoeia, it was kind of like collateral damage be damned. We gotta, the bigger point here is we gotta bring Manhunt to justice, and then at the end it's like he's being all humanitarian and like, oh, all right, she's safe here. Do we have to keep her here? Do we have to keep her locked up? I mean, the next thing is will he allow Mannheim and Mateo to go visit? I mean, yeah, and I did like that reality check that John had there. But you're right. I mean, they have had this like back and forth feelings and flip flopping emotions and motivations throughout. And I felt like with Lois, and that since we're on that topic, I mean, I felt like for it seemed like they were overcompensating for Lois earlier in the episode on that particular point. Where she was like, "This is," she's like, "If we start doing this, we're gonna go into tabloidism and stuff." But I mean, the point wasn't. I mean, I know the head. I mean, you could adjust the headline, but if the substance of the story was, "Here are the bad things that Bruno Mannheim is doing," that's not tabloid. That's just your investigative reporting.
See, and that's where I got a little bit confused with the dialogue, because when she used the word tabloid, I'm like thinking to myself, are they proposing a story where they just are like, hey, guess what, world? Mannheim is married to this woman.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's that's what it felt like to me.
Yeah.
Where they wanted to bring up that even, and I'm thinking in my mind, I'm like, that's not journal. You can go after him, but why would you bring up the family? And then Clark has this line, his secrets can't, like, if he has the secrets, the others that they both share could be much more dangerous. Like, I don't know. It's just like that conversation was very confusing to me as about what the story was.
Yeah. Because
they just found out he was married, because none of them are true investigators. I can't. Can they do a story about how they did not know that? Like, thank you.
Yep. It took Sam Lang and the DOD to like for them to figure it out.
Well, it took Sam and the DOD for like Lois to get like anywhere on this case that she has been wanting to do for like years.
Yeah.
Because he just so happened at this very moment to finally have the files, and it's like, what? What?
Yeah.
That's like serendipitous, but granted, that tape of Lex confessing wouldn't have meant anything at the time because they wouldn't have been listening for that sound.
True.
Whatever. But I do have another thing before I forget. Well, you gotta jog my memory about this. But last week, when we got the quote unquote Mannheim Pia love story, did it seem like Pia had her powers pre-cancer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and which runs contrary to, I don't know if it was in universe or out of universe, as far as on this particular Earth, the people just didn't have superpowers. If I recall, because once we established that this is not the Arrowverse, and that, I don't know if they've had any mentions of Batman or any other, or Flash, or, I mean, I know there was I know Diggle has shown up, but that's a different John Diggle. And I think that opens the door to, the uniqueness or people or supervillains haven't been really discovered. I think that's why I like the XK and all these other things were such a big deal, if I recall from previous episodes or previous seasons. But to your point, it's very clear that, to me, it regardless of the other thing that I just brought up, the powers pre-existed to cancer.
Okay, because I was under the impression, but I mean, everyone else was going through these experiments as he tries to find a cure for her. But one of the side effects is this power. It is interesting, though. I don't know much about the character's origins in the books or anything, but I do, and I know you love this movie so much, but it just reminds me of Jane from Love and Thunder and the whole power, which is a very interesting idea. I just wish they would execute it a little bit better about and I like how they're using a villain in this sense. That's a compelling motive
Hmm.
to have of like I'm dying. I'm I'm. It's a very interesting thing. I just wish like some of the writing was a little bit tighter around here.
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, it seems that since the powers if the powers pre, and it will make sense that the powers pre-existed her coming down with cancer. Because unless, because I think, trying to think with the other people that they did the experiments on, didn't they have pre-existing conditions and then they were using the experimental drugs to, um,
They all were
acquire?
diagnosed with cancer.
Right, right.
And then
Um,
they were using the experimental drugs to try to cure it. And but maybe that just increased the power, which ultimately continues to drain.
mhm,
Um, I'm sure like that whole lady in the hospital,
mhm,
um, when she talked about like that period of time when Pia was sad in high school and disappeared kind of, like I'm
mhm.
sure she like got inadvertently signed up for some kind of experiment and that led to like a radiation overdose and ironically it's gonna all bleed into like why she has cancer and all
Yeah.
of that.
And,
But
yeah, and also it could also bleed into the Hobbs Bay
oh, absolutely.
because of, and maybe ties back to Lex and LexCorp as far as why Mannheim has a vendetta against Lex Luthor.
Well,
Maybe
he
to your
didn't
point.
kill him. He
Hmm?
just made sure that he didn't kill Lex, and
Right.
he was certainly trying to kill John.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know if he has so much of a vendetta. He used the players to manipulate the game to get
Yeah.
what he wanted.
Yeah.
And
Well,
he had the queen to take out all of his opponents. So
yeah.
it's I don't know
Yeah.
why I was using chess metaphors there for just a minute. I don't play chess, but anyways.
No, 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 no. It's definitely, what you are, you should be a screenwriter, even though right now you couldn't write, because I mean you're definitely playing chess while a lot of times these shows play checkers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Except for
yeah.
succession.
No,
uh,
but one thing before we move off of that, I was just trying to think like as far as motivations and then and how with the Hobbs Bay and experimentation and stuff as far as how she acquired her powers. And like you said, I mean, she did whenever they were talking to the other patient when Clark and Christy were talking to her. I mean, she definitely knows a lot more about her background, and maybe that period, like you said, is when she, I don't know if it ties to Lex or maybe to the John Henry, on, I mean, I know the John Henry A on this earth that Manhap killed, if it ties to him, as far as, you know, black ops and experimentation that caused Pia to get this way. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely some. With the 5 episodes we have remaining, I'm sure we'll get maybe more as far as how her powers came about.
well, that and an ending, especially if it's going to be the last
Yeah,
ending of the show, or the final ending of the show.
yeah, yeah.
I'm still calling it. Jordan will factor into this equation at
Yeah.
some point. Mannheim, yeah, he made like his son and Nat get out of the room, but I don't think he's gonna be have any problem killing one of the Kent kids.
Not at all, not at all. Yeah, I'm glad. Yes, it turned into them real fast. Uh, I like this. I like actually the fact that they really drew a lot of just tension and that conflict between these two. I mean, a lot of times they're usually supportive, but this week it actually, it gets to the whole point of what Clark has been trying to share with Jordan as far as using his powers and responsibility of that. Um, Even though Jordan, did not have to go there, that was a super low blow that he like delivered to Jonathan as far as the coffee co- comment, with the training in the firehouse and stuff.
Right. Right. What was more like annoying was like his ignorance about the comment when he was talking with Sarah. I'm just like, dude, grow up.
Yeah, really. Yeah, really. Uh,
Um, do you want to switch over to Central City?
yeah, I think don't think yeah. Other than the like, I know we talked around Lex a little bit. I guess we are going to finally get. Uh, I think one big other, I guess, reveal, not only the that, like we were talking about, the files figuring out that the Kents may have wrongly imprisoned Lex, and or I mean, Lex seems like it's Lex Luthor, so he's probably done some other stuff. But I like the conflict and the ethical issue that they have raised here, with Lois and Clark's methods, that may have inadvertently, put the wrong man in prison. So I'm very hopeful that we'll get a good payoff with that storyline that they have developed here.
Yeah. Okay. What about the Flash?
Basically, we just needed to watch the last 2 minutes. Nah, this is like so. Just when this is like why I guess we abandoned this show,
Yes.
because just when they were like, I was like, all right, we're finally getting some good traction. We had 2 good episodes in a row, and then all of a sudden, I felt like we were back to that interlude shit that has where the hero's not even around except for, like, I mean, Grant got, yeah, he showed up for like a minute and then he was gone again. And it was just like, really, you're down to your last 4 episodes, and your titular character only is in literally like less than 5 minutes of the episode, maybe 5, but it was just, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, there was a reason why last week I made the comment that I like how the episode didn't include, hey, this is what's going on Earth, like, or in present day while Barry is experienced. Like, it was just a solid Barry story.
hmm
I did not realize part 2 would be exactly what was going on without him.
yeah.
I'm like, damn it!
Do we really need this at this point?
Why? And also, okay, speaking about just fast forwarding to the final 2 minutes, how in the hell does it prove that, like, I'm going to take this bullet out of my chest and that's
Mhm.
going to prove I'm Eddie Thawne? Like, I get it. Like, run the forensics. It came from Joe's gun or his gun or whatever. I forget which gun he used.
Yeah.
But, like, I really hated that line. So as much as I was like, okay, I get it. What? Okay. Um, let's remember the good times, literally,
Yeah.
because it's all season 1 flashbacks.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it just um like I'm sorry. Danielle Panabaker, you're great. You're a great actress.
hmm
I can't with you anymore. Like
Yeah.
I and man, like there is a reason why we stopped talking about the show, because if I have to give lectures about steaks
Yeah.
one more time, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. It's a big red flag that always comes up when I watch this show. Is
hmm
like, I don't understand the showrunner at all. I don't understand how you can have these lines about, like, oh, I need to, like, everybody has to be alive when Barry gets back. It's like, well, duh. I mean,
Yeah.
Caitlin literally has 9,000 lives. She's been
Yeah.
killed 5 times.
Yeah.
So
I
it's,
yeah,
yeah.
I fast forwarded through some of that stuff, and then because one, like with the Keone character, is like all of a sudden you just manifested all these extraordinary powers just at the time we like need a convenient method to like get this crystal out of Chillblain, and all, and I was just like, I mean, like, yeah, and I felt like even as I was watching, like I said, God bless Danielle Panabaker. She is, I mean, I just felt like, okay, everybody's just here. I don't want to ever impugn anyone's artistic integrity or because they are professionals and I respect their work, but I just have to feel for them as having to deliver this stuff, and I have to say it did, even that. I don't know if it's because Kayla Compton was directing and it was her first time doing it or whatever, but I just felt like everybody was just like, "Yep, we're just running out the clock here."
Yeah. Yeah.
Except for Rick Cosnet. Now I will say, getting to the things I did like about the episode, and as you said, I mean, it really was again those first season vibes that as far as just as the whatever thing to happen whenever he went to the into the singularity at the end of season one, and now magically comes back and he's Malcolm Fawn, and for the last, I guess, 8 years, 9 years, he's been walking around at Mercury Labs, and no one was like, you look like that cop that died 8 years ago. I mean, yes, I know somebody in Central City surely would have bumped into him that knew about him. But that's neither that that. So I don't know how they're going to, and maybe I'm overthinking as far as trying how they're going to explain that plot point away. If he's been in Central City all this time as Malcolm Gilmore, who just happens to look like Eddie Thawne.
Yeah, see, I don't think he's been in the city all that time.
Okay. So okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think like clearly something's going on with the timeline.
Mm.
I think he like just was like put there almost.
Mm-hmm.
But for one, or maybe he's from another Earth.
Yeah, that's possible.
Like, I agree with you. Like, he really can't have been from that time. Like, that makes no sense because, like, within 10 minutes, half of Central City recognized him.
Yeah. I mean, he was
So,
because
yeah,
Eddie was very prominent. He was head of the Mattatima Task Force and all those things. So it's not like he could just walk around.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
But granted, it is Eric Wallace, so likely he'll have been around the entire time. So, but,
that's true. That's true. Yeah, but so I did like that aspect of the episode as far as just like seeing the flashbacks, him trying to figure out who he was, and I could now as far as the police officer who did speaking to the point of recognizing him, I can't remember if she was from the first season or not. I mean, recently watched the first season again. I don't know if she was part of the task force or if it was just, or that's now she's worked her way up into a leadership position. But to my point earlier, I think that's what would have happened. So I hope they do explain that. But yeah, but as we talked about it, you did say Eddie Thawne last week whenever we were joking about the whole Cobalt Blue adaptation. Even though whenever we were wondering how they were going to do it, and in this case it wasn't a long lost brother of Eddie; it was actually Eddie.
hmm.
But yeah, we'll just sort of see. I guess the thing is now is like with the crystal. I guess I know in the comics it is strong. It is tracking the comics in the sense that Cobalt Blue did use people who were close to Barry. In a comic book, Barry, this was after Crisis, so he was dead. Um, but so he used the powers to get familiar with people that Barry was familiar with to betray their trust. Like a lot of things that are happening in the episode now. Um, but Yeah, but I guess the thing about the crystal here, I guess it's tied to the fawns. So, and I did see, spoiler alert, folks, if you jump ahead if you don't want to hear this, but Tom Cavanaugh is returning for the final episode. So it is all tied to the negative speed force and reverse flash, and we'll get, we saw Fawn last week as far as the original Eobard absorbing Harrison Wells' visage. And we'll get the Tom Cavanaugh version as well. So, um, So well, I'll be interested to see how all this interplays, and I guess we'll get it next week as well as more side adventures with characters we really don't care about.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And then that brings us to spending 5 minutes to talk about Guardians.
Yeah, I know we spent longer on Superman and Lois, but nah, you need more than 5 minutes on
Going
Guardians. I'm
on and
sorry.
on about the Flash. You told me 2 minutes. I
Yeah, I know.
want
I
to know
know. I just had
about
to. I just had to vet. I just had to vet. It's just like
it.
it's so frustrating with that show. Sorry.
Yeah. So, what were your thoughts on Guardians?
I want to hear your thoughts first.
Why?
I just do. I just do. I want to hear what you have to say
I
first.
always like to go second so I can just jump off a point you make and then do it.
All right. Yeah.
This movie, it's good. It's a good movie. I laughed out loud. I did like a weird because there were not a lot of people in the audience at my showing. So I noticed that I was like silently laughing because and other people were laughing, but yeah, like when I say a few people, I mean like maybe five.
Okay.
Um, and I like for those who don't realize, like, remember I live in Alaska, okay? So like five people in a movie theater, crowded.
It's a crowd.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So like I'm not surprised by that at all.
Mhm.
I like this movie. I I really enjoyed it. I did not like spend. I'm so glad I maybe saw one trailer
Mhm.
because I did not spend the entire time being like, oh, this part hasn't happened, so that means this. Like, I didn't. I was just like in the story,
Mhm.
watching things happen, watching the jokes or
Mhm.
listening to the jokes. Yeah, and yeah, overall, it was a good movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Overall, yeah. Same. I really enjoyed it too. And to your point about the trailers, this they Gunn and did a really solid job of like setting up expectations that and head fakes because we all thought when we saw that first trailer we all thought Rocket was going to get it. That we're going to have a death.
oh,
This is going to
really?
get death. Oh yeah, I remember us talking about it. We even joked like Rocket's gone, but
Joke.
um
Like then I was definitely being sarcastic because I could have sworn everybody thought Drax was gonna go.
or Drax. I mean, somebody was, yeah. I mean, well, that's my point. If the trailer's like, even like Peter with one of the other, I think the second trailer with whenever like with the scene where we see them carrying a drunken Peter out, they basically used the marketing very well to like have us all guessing which Guardian was going to get it. But that being said, I mean, I did really enjoy the film. I know right after watching it, really as far as since Endgame, really only two films I've really like gone back to see in a theater more than once has been No Way Home and Wakanda Forever. And this one will be the third because just haven't had opportunity to yet. But I yeah, I just I really did like this movie. I felt like okay, thinking ahead to the DC in the room and with Gunn being heading up the creative side of the studios. I think we'll be getting good films from Warner Brothers moving ahead. Um, so yeah, those are my just overall thoughts of the film.
Yeah. When you said DC in the room, I was like, oh, that's the new streaming service. And the way you said it, I was just like, what is that? And then it took me a while. I was like,
Yeah,
okay, when he's in the room with D, got it.
yeah.
Okay. Oh my God. Um, yeah. So, I don't know why I'm blanking. Like I did
Oh
like this
no.
film. I'm just like I don't know what to necessarily talk about because it's
Well,
a movie, people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess maybe just overall, instead of beat by beat, as far as like, plot points. I mean, I think overall themes for me with this movie was, uh, it was, you know, we finally, one, we got Rocket, to one pop point. I mean, we did finally get the Rocket origin story, and it's been something that through the first two films, we were uh, one wondering like what it's been touched on, and all, and Rocket's denial of like that he is a raccoon, and so it was really, it was a lot. We got that finality as far as like with people's stories, like with Rocket accepting who you are, and also just as far as the Guardians of a whole, I just recently rewatched the first one, and that element of like found family and that family dynamic, and how you all these people have lost families along the way. Like Peter lost his mother, Drax lost his, Gamora and Nebula, had a brutal family life with what Thanos did to both of them. But they all came together, and now we do get that family unit, and then even we as the audience got it, especially with the end there, with when Groot was like, "I love you guys," and so so those kind of themes were really something that I thought I was just had just a goofy grin throughout, as I was watching this movie, because I just it was the first MCU film in a long time, other than, like I said, the two that I mentioned, where I really felt invested in the story.
Right. Yeah. Granted, Rocket was gonna go and play with his other friends, like,
Yeah,
and not return. Like, if he had a choice, he was
yeah,
kind of pushed aside.
yeah.
He was told not now,
Not
later.
now. Yeah, yeah,
Later. You're currently banned from the clubhouse.
yeah, yeah.
You killed us. Yeah. Um. I'm like going through my notes, being like, everything seems so stereotypical to talk about. Yeah. I don't know. I'm just so tired. Um, God, there was something else you brought up that I was gonna touch on besides just making that comment about Rocket's family. Yeah, the flashbacks were good. I was surprised by how much.
Mm,
But at the end of the day, I liked it. I was fine with Rocket being technically benched the
hmm
majority of the film,
yeah,
because his story was used to actually give our villain motive.
hmm
A very good motive, a very interesting motive, because you have the creator who
yeah,
ultimately, yeah, the Guardians kill him, but at the same time, his downfall comes because he can't handle, um, because of his own desire for perfection, I guess you
yeah,
would say.
hmm
And also just annoyance that like Rocket is the one who surpassed him. Like, he figured out something that even he couldn't figure out.
yeah,
Um, so he's both in awe of it and like um, angry at it. And I thought that was depicted really, really well.
yeah.
So yeah, I like the flashbacks. The one thing about the Rocket storyline that I did, especially when you bring up the first film,
hmm
is Groot.
mm
Like, there was something magical in that first film, just because of Groot and Rocket. Like,
hmm
they were a tag team. So,
hmm
like, I don't know. Gunn, maybe you should have thrown in a little, like, and after he escaped the crazy place, he met Groot.
yeah,
It's just
yeah,
that was one of the things where there's so many callbacks, and to your point, a lot of like full circle moments for these characters and for this franchise. Yet one of the most loved things was like pushed aside. I mean, we spent 45 minutes hearing about how Peter wants to save his best friend. Drax, of course, rightfully so, stepping in and say second best,
yeah,
because Rocket is Groot's best friend. Come on, people.
Yeah, Groot or Groot's son. I mean, either, yeah, that's the case. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, now I'm just thinking about baby Groot and how that would work. But yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I like Adam Warlock. I'm hearing a lot of people give shit to Adam Warlock. I didn't mind that he was stupid.
Yeah. It
Um,
makes, yeah,
I thought his jokes worked. His hug joke worked far more than the hug joke in Quantumania.
totally. Totally. And I guess, yeah, and I don't have the encyclopedic knowledge of Adam Warlock from I mean, I've heard of the character before, but, and I do see a lot of angst out there among fandom of the character. That they were expecting, when they heard Adam Warlock. But I mean, this is the movie about big guardians, and it's not about Adam Warlock. And he was a supporting character, and and the seeds, and one other point that I liked about how they explained why he was such a goof was that he was taken out too soon, and actually, like, I mean, the seeds of I think I don't know if it was Coy Jandreau or some, or maybe Winston. I was listening to Harloff's review, and they
Mhm.
made the point that, um, or maybe it was another one, but bottom line that they planted the seed of Adam way back in the first film, where he was actually, we saw briefly maybe on Nowhere, that that he was in the egg. Um, and so it makes sense for, even though he had the amazing debut, which I think that's the Warlock that people were expecting throughout the film. Um, it they in the film itself, they say, we brought him out too early, so it totally explains why he is how he is, and gives the character room to grow into what people expected when they brought this character into this film.
Yeah, and I think in terms of Guardians of the Galaxy, like when we think of characters in this universe, in this story, singular story, we don't think of like the Captain Americas of
Mhm.
the solar system. We don't
Right.
think of that. I love the fact that they played weirdo at the
Mhm.
start of this movie.
Yep.
Because it just fit for not only this movie, but it also fit for the entire, like, what Guardians is all about. Like, we see a lot
Yep.
of very strange things with Guardians, of course,
Yeah.
PG-13. So yeah, to your point, like, they explained it. He behaved accordingly, and
Mhm.
his hug joke worked.
Yep.
Okay, granted, the entire time I was thinking about how superior of a movie this is to Quantumania,
Mhm.
like, in every which way. The
Yep.
people who gave Quantumania like a pass because of the quote unquote visual effects, fuck you. Because the visual effects in this movie, like, dear Lord, I just don't understand. I'm still mad. Like, as much as I love this movie, it just fueled like a hate for Quantum Mania to just like come right
Mhm.
back up. I'm like, oh, that movie
Yeah.
bothered me so much.
Yeah.
Because it did all the wrong things, and like
Mhm.
this movie pretty much did all the right things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up music, because I did make a note about that too, and how throughout all three of these films, how score really, like, is also what sets the Guardians trilogy up and out, as far as giving that distinctive voice, more so than other films in the MCU, and even other films in general. As far as, like, whenever you use various songs, like,
oh, so you're
No
talking about
Sleep.
the soundtrack, not the score.
Yeah, yeah, the
Uh,
soundtrack. Yeah, the soundtrack, and also the score too. I mean, some of the original compositions, but also the soundtrack. Um, whenever using, like, very popular songs like "No Sleep Till Brooklyn" and how it's utilized in the story, but then other parts of the soundtrack. again, serve, those songs are really like, if when you listen to the lyrics, they're also part of telling the story about these characters and what they're feeling at that moment. And instead of just, of course we had the big hallway fight with, but it worked there. It wasn't just like, oh, we're just, using a very popular song from the Beastie Boys to, like, make it a kick-ass scene, which it was a kick-ass scene, but, you know, but it
Well,
fit. Yeah.
it's what we expect. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the third Guardians movie, and the soundtrack like won all sorts of awards from the first one. So I wouldn't expect the one. Ironically, the one song that threw me, and not because it's a bad song, because I happen to love this song. I remember listening to the song a fucking lot when it first came out. But when they started playing "Dog Days Are Over" by Florence and the Machine, I'm like, what what? Huh? Like
Yeah.
that one, still don't really understand how it got on, like really, because that, I don't know how big that song was. I
Well, I
remember
love that.
listening
I
to
love
it.
that song. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It threw me, and I still don't necessarily know if it worked exactly, because it was just a bit jarring. But yeah, I expect nothing less than a grade A soundtrack for a Guardians movie,
Yeah.
or for a James Gunn movie.
Exactly. I was going to say any kind of James Gunn project, because I mean we saw that, like, Peacemaker and the Suicide Squad and other projects from him as well.
Yeah. Um, what other things to talk about? Gamora. We're
Mhm.
all idiots, or at least I am, because like for some reason, the thought that, oh, of course she's gonna be quote unquote alive in this movie is because she's the version of Gamora that came from the past to the future in Endgame.
Right.
Why didn't anybody explain that to me sooner? I mean, I'm kind of glad nobody did, because during the movie I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Check it out. Well,
Well, it's been, yeah.
granted, he did say, like, I don't know though why everyone else from the past like got snapped out of Earth except for her,
Mhm.
but whatever.
Yeah.
Soul Stone. So it works, but I'm glad that they also kind of acknowledge there's also a massive hole in it, but just go with it. So I like that. I
Yeah.
like how she was handled.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't know what other word to use than just like it's a good movie, just because I don't really have that many criticism about it.
Yeah.
And when I do hear people talk about it, instead of like joining in on the fray, I'm more like, well, to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, exactly. And that's, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's obviously there's some nits, but I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, there's not the nits that, like, that stick with you. Like, it's been like now almost a week since I watched a film, and usually if there's a, like, we have, if there's like the bad nit, or like, oh God, the third act like fell apart like usual or something like that. I mean, I just don't have those kind of things that just like are like just nagging me after watching this film. If anything, the more distance I get from it, the more I appreciate this movie and realize, like, oh, this is, and like thinking back to when I watched the first Guardians years ago, this is, when I really think about it, the Guardians trilogy, especially the first Guardians, but was really when I think really got locked into the MCU as far as just a franchise. Other ones I like the films and stuff, but the thing is, I was not familiar with these characters really at all, and and when I saw Guardians, obviously it did kick off many things as far as the souls, with the soul, the Infinity Stones and everything. So it was a very foundational film, the first volume one, for many things that led up to Endgame. And but also for me, but also I think really expanded the MCU to more than just the, you know, earthbound adventures that we saw in this universe.
Yeah. I don't know. I've always been the Guardians has just always been I don't I remember liking the first one. I remember having some issues with the second one.
Yeah.
And the third one just fresh out of the theater, my first thought was like, I think this is my favorite Guardians movie.
Yeah.
But then again, that was fresh out of the theater, so I would have to watch, and I can't honestly remember the last time I watched the first movie, much less the second movie. I've listened to Kind of Funny's reviews and rewatches, so especially the second one, they're very high on the second one. I don't really understand it, but hey, teach their own.
Right.
But yeah, so I guess my point being is going into this movie, like Guardians was never like I can't wait for the next Guardians movie coming out. I was like, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
And no, Will, I didn't stay for the very end where they tease that Star-Lord will return.
Well, you didn't miss it. Yeah, that was a nit for me, that as far as Peter and the grandfather, because again, I had completely forgotten about the grandfather, and the only reason why it made any point for me, it was because like I said, I just recently getting ready to watch Volume 3. I did rewatch the first film. I didn't get a chance to watch the second film, but I remembered the grandfather because of that, and but also like thinking also that when prior to the end credit, within the movie, earlier in the movie, when it came up about Peter's grandfather and, you know, why Peter running from Earth and that kind of stuff. Yeah, I was like, oh yeah, but I was like, I thought about that moment whenever Peter's mom dies, and
Right. It's the whole Peter grandfather, like, actually, I guess that would be my one criticism. As much as I like everyone coming full circle, it did feel weird to me.
Yeah.
We just saved Rocket. We have Rocket back. Bye guys. Bye guys.
Yeah.
I'm like, you fought to like reunite only to disperse. And I get everyone kind of, it made sense in terms of what we were seeing, except for the Peter grandfather thing. It just,
Yeah.
it would have, if this was the true end game that James had in mind for him, I wish a seed would have been planted in at least the second movie, you know?
Yeah. It didn't feel earned. It didn't at all. And so that was one that I do. Even when I was watching the film, I'm like, he doesn't talk about Grandpa much at all.
Well, even returning to Earth, like the thought, it was clear to me in that scene early on where it's brought up, the thought had never even crossed his mind to go back home.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then like, oh, but we're gonna have this exchange, and now that's all you can think about. And it's like, no, he's still clearly in love with Gamora.
Right.
And so, like, he'll stay there for 2 days.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me. Like, maybe he has to stay there long enough to know how to drive a car. Maybe
he'll learn how. Yeah, he can do that. And I remember when I was reading the paper, whenever he was having the scene, reminded me a lot of actually of Andor, because he's like with eating cereal, because Grandpa's sitting there reading the paper, and there was a reference to Doctor Strange, I believe, if I recall real quickly on the film in the paper there. But that was the one that. But again, I guess, it gets to the point where it's like, it's the found family. Everybody's lost something, but then but at the same time, everyone has gained something too. And I guess in Peter's case, maybe this is his since he, I don't know if I don't say he has come to accept that what happened with Gamora, but I think he's like, okay, I can start to grow and move from what happened and losing what we had. And especially whenever she's like, had made the point of, I bet we were fun. And I think that not only includes Peter, but I think just the whole group as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just a little bit distracted because I noticed in my notes how I misspelled Adam and the spell checking didn't even catch it. And now I'm
Oh,
just trying to think
oh,
what does the word ADMA mean?
oh, yeah, I just saw
Is
that
that
too.
even a real word? Like, why is it not? Huh, interesting.
Yeah.
And how did well, I know how I misspell words all the time. But yeah,
Yeah.
anything else? I'm just thinking
Um,
about here.
I mean, only other. I mean, I know the organic cat planet. I love the moments with Nathan Fillion's character and whenever like, oh, the bit where it's like, oh yeah, I have one of those too. As far as with the, as far as the knucklehead cousin or friend, that recurring joke that happened. I mean, those were moments where I definitely like laughed out loud, for sure. And then, and I know a lot has been made of the, clearly the high evolutionary and the experimentation. I think Opita, like tweeted out,
Yep.
about, how James Gunn was recognized for not addressing that issue in this film. And and I know a lot of people are like, oh, we'll get broke and all that kind of stuff, and or politics and films and whatnot. But it was a very, it made the point without beating you over the head in a lecturing kind of way, but that, this was some nasty shit that was going on that the High Evolutionary was doing.
Right.
And and I will say the one moment where I did gasp was not necessarily experimentation, but when Rocket and his friend were like talking, and then High Evolutionary killed her. I did. I mean, even though I saw that the friends, we know with the experimentation where it was going to go, but to see it happen in that moment, I mean, whether it was they were euthanized to do the experiments, or when the experiments went wrong and in the tubes, or when he just flat out murdered her. I did. I was just like, I did get that was a, and the hats off to Bradley Cooper, and I can't remember who did the voice for what was her name? His one of the four animals there. But that moment, that definitely got me. But I was telling a friend, they were asking, should I take my kid to it? I was like, well, yeah, I don't know if they're under 10, I don't know.
Mm.
They're thinking about taking their grandsons, and I'm like, I don't know if you should, Dad. Maybe when they're a little bit older. It
Uh,
might be a bit much for little kids with some of the animal, experimentation that was going on.
right. Right.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, but yeah, that, and also that Encounter Earth too. I mean, that was, with I thought that was a funny bit, even though it was ended tragically. But to your point earlier, with the dangers of someone playing God like that, and destroying whole civilizations just because of, he's just jealous of Rocket.
Yeah. Well, he's obsessed with Rocket. Like
And he has, yeah,
everything else he creates pales in comparison. So he's willing to destroy all his other creations just in order to get the one that truly worked and to figure out why.
yeah,
Um, so I wasn't expecting that, because we've gotten similar characters in the past, but never going down that route. So
yeah,
it was a good twist on something we have seen before. So
yeah,
and very well acted and performed as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's. I know we saw him in, Peacemaker, and
Yep.
he's very good actor, and 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 also just the whole high evolutionary Rocket interplay. When Rocket did get his, we learned why he has the mask and stuff. I mean, it was even though it's like, hey, it's Red Skull, but um, that was another like very cathartic moment for Rocket and we as viewers, as far as like, yeah, this guy got what he's got what he was coming towards him for doing these things. So, but yeah, I mean, again, it was a very good film. I mean, it's just so many. Well, now that I know it took us a moment to get into it, but once you start really breaking it down and thinking about what all transpired, it's a very packed film.
Yeah, I don't know how many I wrote out. What did I do? Opening nowhere fight scene, bomb ass, and then we do a bunch of flashback thingy, and then we go to Counter Earth. No, we go to the organic planet, and then we go to Counter Earth, and then we have the final sequence. We probably spent the most time in the beginning, and then when we get to organic planet,
yeah,
like a good 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And then a good 20 minutes in Counter or on Counter Earth, and then a good 20 minutes in space.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the only reason I allow the almost like Peter Quill death is because it's a callback to the first movie, because a similar thing happens, and I'm like, he did it once, like why the hell? I don't care anymore. Granted, they did it like. They went very far, and I'm like, really? You have to have him loaded? Like, whatever. I just let it go. Yeah. So if you haven't watched it, go and watch it. Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, Will, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at Will M. Polk, WILLMPOLK.
You can find me at SJ Belmont, SJBELMONT. Please follow our crew on Twitter at Scene and Nerd. Find us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and visit our website, www.sceneandnerdpodcast.com. But most importantly, rate, follow, and comment on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Good night, Geek Out. You're welcome.